again by Benning. Darnell Nurse left it in the corner, gets up center. Perry scores! Corey Perry!
Lilia able to shake away from Solani. It's given away to Solani. Around in front. Score! Teemu Solani with the steal. Bring in the fans. 1-1. Score! On the floor! On the board! Paul Kariya!
So I just feel that given certain life choices you've made recently, that like part of me is like super proud of you and part of me is like super sad because like this life isn't fun. It's not great. I don't want anybody to suffer through this life like I have. But at the same time, when it hits, it's the ultimate long shot. And when these stupid idiots figure it out, you're going to be so happy you chose the Clippers.
I know. For backstory, anyway, welcome back to the show. We're finally back after a couple of months. Before backstory to that, I finally decided on an NBA team. I haven't. Now, I know before everybody gets into this and any Canadian fans that we have, I know I should be rooting for the Raptors. And I've tried. To my credit, I have given it my all, and I've tried. But I just haven't been able to do. Like I also can't like support the Blue Jays. I don't know why. Like there's just something about it being the token Canadian team and the only Canadian team in the sport where I just feel like I can't do it. Like I just can't get behind it. I don't know what it is. And in baseball, I finally randomly settled on the White Sox. And I don't really watch a lot of baseball.
Hat.
But for the NBA,
an absolutely elite hat, though, if we're being honest.
Hat.
Which really, for baseball, is what
part of my reasoning.
Just a good baseball hat.
A good hat, and it's just settled on that. And then I've always been partial to the Clippers, but never could for a while I was thinking, okay, maybe Memphis because they had a few Canadian guys, and then when Ja got there, I was like, I like Ja, and now I hate Dylan Brooks, so that one kind of devolved quickly, and I just couldn't get behind another team. But I've always been a big PG fan, and I like Russ, and then Russ landed with the Clippers, and I give Kawhi some credit for the championship he brought to Toronto, basically single-handedly, with some help from the Warriors' injuries. I settled on the Clippers, and I'm ready for disappointment.
It's the best, man. It's so much fun. Like, I
looked at the roster too.
It's absurd.
It's like maybe two or three more years of this, and then we're into the rebuild. We're into a rebuild, so
And here's the thing about it that I feel, I think you might be the only other person I feel badly for this than myself, because I'm very much throwing a pity party over this probably for the rest of my life. It does suck that you're rooting for the team that traded away the best young Canadian basketball player.
Yeah.
That does hurt.
I tried OKC too, but there was just something about it I couldn't.
You can't do that. Fuck that.
Because Lou Dort and Shea are both Canadians.
Oh, Lou Dort's Canadian kid?
He's from Montreal.
Oh,
so it's not exactly the same thing. But I tried a few teams and I couldn't get behind it, but settled on the Clippers. So we'll see how it goes. And
God, I hope they sign Russ to a max extension immediately. I love him so much. Like I was so in on him coming to the Clippers, honestly. Because to me, it was just like, fuck it, this can't get worse, so let's just get weirder. Like, it was totally for the meme because, I thought he was cooked. He wasn't, having a lot of success with the Lakers and all that. And he came into LA and he did the one thing that, I think you're really asking him to do, which is be available all the time and to be a guy guys like playing with. Like, he provides personality. I love PG and I love Kawhi, but those two dudes are not.
Kawhi is the opposite of personality.
Kawhi's a robot, and it's wonderful. But PG is just more kind of like, ha ha ha, have fun, kind of chill.
He's in the middle.
Russ
is, he's in the middle.
Russ is just all raw, emotion and charisma and all that stuff. And so, to have somebody who can actually kind of, because like it's weird because like the Clippers roster is really good. This is a basketball podcast now. The Clippers roster is really good in a supporting sense, but it's completely useless without one or two guys to build it all around. And at least Russ functionally can provide that kind of presence, even if not.
He did everything he could
kind of play
to try and hold it on, but after Kawhi went down in Game 2,
it was done.
It was done.
Yeah.
It was done.
That was it. Then we find out it was a torn meniscus. But come on, man.
Yeah. Well, we got to move from one struggling team to another, to the Ducks. I know we're delayed here, so I guess we're in season review time. After missing a few months of shows, heads up, apologies for that, guys. Dealing with some stuff personally here, so took a break from the show, but probably
you can just tell them. You can just tell them you're suing me for libel because of the book I published in the Czech Republic called Eddy Von Who. And it's about why you're a fraud. So
I was going to say...
We've been having to sort out those legal troubles.
Pat and Jay escaped from our basement. And we've spent the last 2 months trying to hunt them down, so...
Yeah, exactly. It's like the purge.
But let's be honest. If there was a time and an end to a season to probably skip, this would be it. It was an exciting end to the season on the opposite end of the spectrum, right? Where it came down to the last game and everybody... in Team Tank was rooting for a regulation loss against the Kings because there was a flurry of Ducks fans that were getting upset that the Ducks were winning games and pulling themselves out of contention. And for a little bit there, it seemed like they had no chance of finishing last. And then the Blackhawks rattled off a couple wins. I think the Blue Jackets won like 3 in a row to end the season.
Mm-hmm. They won over Pittsburgh, too. They won some games over a couple teams.
Yeah, they had a hard end to the season with their schedule, but like Pittsburgh just kind of fell off and ended up missing the playoffs, and the tires deflated there. And the Ducks just lost enough games, especially the last one there, to just edge it out, just squeak it out for the best odds. So ended up finishing 32nd in the NHL, 31st worst offense, 2.51 goals per game, the worst goals against average at 4.09, second worst power play at 15.72%, and the second worst penalty kill at 72.1%. So all in all, your thoughts on the season, quick summary. Is this worse or better than you expected them to be, or right kind of in the middle?
I think the results were worse than I expected them to be a little bit. Like, I was pretty down on this team. But, like, with how hard Arizona and Chicago, among other teams, are really going into it, I figured they would probably end up similar to where they were for, I guess, maybe closer to, Jamie Drysdale as far as, like, that 6th spot. I figured they'd kind of end up in that 4, 5, 6 range. And then you just hope for a little bit of lottery luck, right? But as far as, like, the quality of play, this is about what I expected. Like, you said it right now, and I hadn't really thought about it. But, like, yeah, that definitely felt like a season where they gave up 4 goals a game.
Yeah.
Like, and I think that fact, thinking about it, is one of the more illuminating kind of statistics to take away from the season. Is, like, it felt like they gave up 4 goals every fucking game. Like, it felt every bit of the rough season that it was.
Yeah,
and the numbers really just validate that. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, like, we expected, like, I think in our season preview, trying to remember back, we talked about it being like an all gas, no brakes type season where we knew the defense was going to be bad and they would be among the worst in that, and it would come down to can the goaltending kind of offset that a little bit, and at times it did.
And special teams, yeah.
And the penalty kill, which were both awful. So then it was, okay, is the offense going to be at least decent enough that you'll win a few games, you'll outscore a couple teams, you'll get in those shootout type games. It wasn't. But when you look at like the final numbers for this team and where guys finished in points, like there isn't really anything that stands out and says, oh, that was amazing, or guys that you look at and say, well, like, that's a surprise that he did that bad. there really aren't too many shocks there. Like Zegras and Terry leading the team in scoring by a significant margin, it makes sense. Cam Fowler's a bit of surprise for having 48 points, but when they don't really have anybody else at the blue line, and the fact that with Klingberg struggling, he kind of took over some power play duties, so he did have a decent amount of power play points on the season too. McTavish had a good rookie season. Vetrano and Strome were kind of what you expected, right? Vetrano 20 goals, 40-plus points. Strome around that 40-plus point mark. Henrique again, 20 goals, almost 40 points. So, everybody was kind of right around where you expected them to be. Silverberg, even through injuries, around what you expect him to be now. Maybe the one disappointment, in a sense, is John Klingberg not producing and being the power play quarterback you thought he would be. But, looking at the list, we listed the top 19 guys in our notes here. Nobody, for me at least, stands out and says, oh, that's super disappointing, or that's way above what we expected them to do.
I would say, so the one for me, I will say, is Isaac Lindstrom. I think you would have liked to see him closer to 10 and 20.
Yeah.
And he still missed 21 games, and that's not nothing. But I think 4 goals, 10 assists in 61 games, only 2 penalty minutes. 3 of his goals were even strength. 1 of them was shorthanded. So he's doing the stuff that you really kind of expect him to do, right? He's not taking bad penalties. He's not really taking penalties at all. He's playing on the penalty kill. He's able to be, an aggressive checking skater. But I think especially after the year he had last year, there was always going to be a little bit of a letdown in his numbers, but it would have been nice, I think, to see him finish closer to 10 and 20. And then I'm actually curious how you feel. For me, I don't know how to feel about the Ryan Strome thing. I kind of feel disappointed, but I'm not 100% sure how fair that is.
Yeah.
So, I really am kind of curious what your thoughts are on that, because I don't know how to contextualize Ryan Strome.
Yeah, it's slightly disappointing because it was labeled maybe unfairly so as a marquee signing, right? It was a big deal. They brought him in to kind of replace what you're losing in a sense in Ryan Getzlaf. I think it's at the very bottom of his production is at the very bottom of it, just not being disappointing. I think it's dumb to say because it's only 2 points, but if he was under 40, I would have been looking at this maybe a little different just visually.
Yeah.
I think if it was over 50, then you're looking at this as a massive success for him to get to that point. So he is kind of right in the cusp there of being a disappointment. The fact that Vetrano had, the same amount of points, more goals than him, one less game played, I think that's a bit more surprising because that's what you expected. And that's, I think, the high end of what you wanted from Vetrano was 20-plus goals and 40 points. So that was a success. That worked out well for him. Mm-hmm. Whereas with Strome, it's okay, it's good, but it's at very close to not being good, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the thing about it for me, especially with Strome, is I would have liked to see him hit 30 assists.
Yeah.
I think that's the part of it for me that, once I became a bit more familiar, once I saw him play and saw how much he is a natural playmaker, right? He definitely is a guy who's looking to make good, clean passes and stuff like that. And sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. But, I definitely think he could have finished under 10 goals, but if he'd have finished over 30 assists, I would feel a little bit more. I think I would feel a fair bit differently about the season. I also think at this point, it's kind of fair to say he's not likely a center on this team unless it's in a third line role.
Yeah.
But, I think as a complementary top 6 winger, I think he can be very interesting. So yeah, I don't know. I'm just kind of curious where you're at on the Strome thing. And like you said, if it's weird that 2 points could make that big of a difference in your perception, but I think you're right. I think it was like 15 and 26 is along the lines of the splits that you're accepting, right? Because that's almost a 2-to-1 assist ratio, right? So like that's exactly what you're kind of hoping for from him. But I think that's actually what you said. That's the best. The best little bit is, and I think makes a lot of sense to me. He kind of came in with some unfair expectations because the team overperformed and got so much good luck early last year that people thought they could be a little bit more competitive. And then he was brought in very like for like with Ryan Getzlaf, except they're not like for like. And I don't know that it was ever really presented that way, but it's a very easy kind of step to take. Mm-hmm. And I think that definitely kind of colors, because like I don't feel like the deal's bad at $5 million. You know what I mean? Like if he's this guy, like if he's a 15 and 30 guy,
I think in a better team with more support.
Yes.
We saw that with the Rangers, right? Where he can easily be a consistent 15-30 guy, right? He was a 15-30 guy every season with the Rangers, except one where he was 14 and 35, and that was in only 56 games. So he was always that guy. And full seasons with the Rangers, like I said, he was always that guy. In one season with the Islanders, he was a 15-30 guy, and then a couple tough seasons near the end with the Islanders and really tough seasons with the Oilers. But all things considered, with how bad the Ducks were, it's not awful, but it is funny, like you said, in the sense if he had 2 less points, it optically doesn't look good. If he has 4 more assists, he's at 30 assists, at 15-30, and he's at 45 points, and you're like, okay, like that's pretty much on par with the last couple seasons, and you can account for, that plus 5 points that you would expect with a better team, plus 5 or 10 points.
Right.
If he had a bit more support and the power play was better and the offense just in a whole was better, that you could expect, an additional 5 points, and he'd be just sneaking into that maybe 20-30 range, 50 points, and then you'd be like, okay, like that's right around his career average, right? Mm-hmm. So he's not far off of it, and I do still think he's a good player to keep around as some depth. He is a good player. He still put up 41 points on this team. He was still in the top 5 of scoring among forwards on this team, right? I mean, Adam Henrique would have likely passed him with more games, but he did put up. There's a gap after Henrique. It really drops off when you get down to Comtois and Jones, right? So there is 6 main guys clearly in that forward core this year, and he was a part of that. So what that looks like next year, if you say, if you do get Connor Bedard and he immediately jumps into that top 6, does that push Ryan Strome down the lineup and you see less from him, or does he get more opportunities potentially, and does Vetrano get pushed down? So that will be interesting to see how that dynamic works, but I would definitely at least give him another year and see how he can work, and hopefully a better team that has a little bit more dynamic essence, I guess you could say, to their offense, a little bit more flair to it, and really see what he could do, because I think we got the bare minimum of what you expect from Ryan Strome, right? We got the bare minimum, nothing less, but nothing more. It was just kind of bare expectations of what you would hope from him. It's about 40 points, right?
Yeah, it's interesting too, because I think because he was playing with talented players, because he was playing for a bad team, because he was playing for a team that seemed to lack consistent structure in either end. I think towards the end of the season, the defense definitely started to improve, and I would be very curious to know kind of what little changes and things like that were made, and if it was just not having certain guys there, or was having Klingberg. Certain guys there. Yeah, or even Kulikov, right? Like I don't say I loved Kulikov. I re-signed him this summer. Like no beef with him.
Yeah.
It's just more of just like sometimes taking different guys out and moving different guys in just changes the dynamic.
Yep.
And so I think what you saw, to get back to the actual point I was trying to make, is the full highs and lows of the Ryan Strome experience. Like you saw how big the concerns can be defensively. And you also saw why he's a great complementary piece for a talented forward group. I mean, you saw the whole thing. He can play in the center. He can play on the wing. Playing him, his style of play doesn't change no matter where he plays. He's still looking to do the same things. It's just what kind of positions he's in and what the expectations are of him defensively. But the less defense you can ask him to do, the better. I think you're definitely right in that. All in all, I think it's fair to say that this was a C+ season for him. Between the unfair weight of expectations kind of coming in, and then just the general results. Like, he was a productive player, and he kind of finished close inverse of Henrique, which is kind of another thing that we were looking for, right? A more offensive version of Henrique, which we see with the playmaking.
Yeah.
And then also not being as good on defense. But like you said, I think he's going to be a good player to keep around. I got to be honest, I have put him in trades in my head because that $5 million is a nice little number.
Yeah.
But if they do trade Henrique, which I expect the team to do, he is going to be a guy that I think is going to benefit the team to have around because of his experience, because of his ability, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So
that's what I was the next point I was going to kind of lead to there was with Henrique is that there's still potential he gets moved this off season. I've seen a few people, I think Elliot Friedman's mentioned it a bit, just kind of in passing, of guys who could move this summer, and Henrique and Gibson are kind of the guys' names that keep coming up here. So yeah, if you do move on from Adam Henrique, it is good to still have a guy like Ryan Strome around, where without Adam Henrique in the lineup there, his top 6 spot is kind of guaranteed for next year, no matter who comes in the draft. So, he can play that role. So it is good to still have a guy like that around because, even if you get Connor Bedard next year or at the draft this year, like next year's not going to be a fun season either. Like there's not really much that you're adding at the NHL level beyond him. Like there aren't any prospects, or at least high-end prospects the Ducks have that would seemingly make the roster next year. Like the expectation is Zellweger and Mintyukov, and even I think Renault would be in the AHL next year, at least to start the season there. And then on the forward side of things, you don't really have anybody stepping in yet. So
no, San Colangelo's on like his 4th fucking college.
Yeah, and Pastuov, at the very least, I don't think he's AHL eligible yet. He might be, but that would be the starting point for him. If not going back to junior for another year, I think he is AHL eligible. So that would be
Jacob Perreault, Braden Tracy.
And those guys haven't taken a massive step forward. So, you would hope, but there's no beyond who you draft at, 1, 2, or 3 this year. And unless it's Michkov, there's really no guarantee. And I think outside of Bedard and Fantilli, even with Carlson, there's no guarantee that he comes over right away next year either. So there is a guy that you're going to want to keep around there because it still is going to be bleak. You need guys to fill out the roster, get you to the salary floor. So I think he does stick around. But yeah, I do think Adam Henrique is moved this offseason just again, with some guys knocking on the door and with the fact that he was almost moved at the deadline and now seemingly that's been pushed off to the draft at the very least, or if not in the offseason. I want to talk about McTavish a bit because, he was a big discussion in our preseason, our season preview about how he would do and his, being up for the call. They're ultimately not in the conversation, but not going to be kind of one of the top 3 guys in the running.
No.
All things considered, very successful rookie season. 17 goals, 43 points, established himself as kind of like the premier threat on the power play. He had the most power play goals on the team. He had 7. So he kind of established his role on this team and what you can expect from him in the future. He did end up eventually taking over a center position and being kind of like a second or third line center for this team at times. I know he filled in at first line center as well when they decided to push Zegras to the wing. So I think all in all, an impressive season from Mason McTavish, not in the running for the Calder and in what I guess you could call was a weak year for the Calder Trophy, but the signs point to, in the right direction for his development this is a real good step forward for him to build on next year and hopefully become, a 50 to 60 point player next year and then really round out his game as a solid 2-way player.
let me ask you a question. Did you see anything this year from McTavish to make you think he isn't a top six center?
No.
Me either. And I think that's huge. There was nothing I saw from him this year that didn't go. I mean, at worst, he's a second line center. Like, everything about the way that he plays, the consistency, um, he's incredibly skilled. He works really hard. Like, he does everything that you want out of a rookie, and he's got an incredible skill set. I think I'm going to be a crank for 10 seconds, and everybody can, you can ignore me. You can turn the volume down, count to 10, whatever you want. I was very surprised at how little I felt like he made himself. Let me say it this way. I was very surprised by how little impact I felt like he had physically in the games. Yeah. I don't feel like he I was surprised. I think he ended up with 50 hits or something like that, which I thought was a pretty surprising number. I expected, and this is my own personal bias, obviously, that just a player of that size with that position who's been that size and come up through the Canadian hockey, like, I expected him to be much more physical. And he uses his body incredibly well, especially around the net. Like, he's not afraid of contact or anything like that, but he's not a guy going around and looking to lay people out, which I thought might have been a little bit of a dynamic he could bring. And look, he could absolutely grow into it. But that was just something I was a little surprised by. But other than that, I think the best way for me to say it is just I didn't see anything from him this year that would make me think he's not a top six center for the next 10 years in this league. So yeah. I thought he was great. I think, you saw the shot, you saw the defensive abilities, you saw the size and the skating and the skill, and he was great.
Yeah, it just felt like he eased his way into the league, and not in a negative way where, there's a base there for where you can see where improvement can be made. Like, he had 161 shots. I think eventually what you would hope for and expect from him is 200-plus shots a season, right? Like, the only guy above that for the Ducks was for Toronto. He had 231. The only other guys with more shots than McTavish were Zegras and Terry with 184 and 188. So he was still top four on the Ducks, but he is a guy eventually, I think, with the shot that he has, and given more opportunities. Like, of the Ducks fours we've discussed with Zegras, Terry, Henrique, Strome, Vetrano. I'm trying to see if there's anybody else above him. I don't think there was, but they all played. Even Silfverberg was right around it, but they all played more minutes than him as well. And in some cases, 2 or 3 more minutes a night as well. So that will go up potentially as early as next year too, 16, 17 minutes a night. And those 2 extra minutes will make a difference in his stats and his shots, points, everything all considered together. He'll be a power play 1 guy. They figured out what his role is going to be on that power play 1 as the trigger man. He wasn't that for the entire season. Do you think a better power play with him as the trigger man, with him getting more comfortable being physical, I think eventually he'll be a 100-plus hits guy as well, as was at 55 this year. So once he gets kind of built more too, right? He's still a young kid. Gets built more used to the physicality in this game, willing to kind of go into those areas and play that role.
Yeah, and I don't, I'm not trying to cut, I am obviously trying to cut you off, but like, I do think it's worth saying, like, he didn't shy away from anything. No. He was around the net. He was in the corners, all that kind of stuff. I think, I do think you're right that as he grows a little bit more, he might throw himself into those corners with a little bit more violence or recklessness. But, he absolutely wasn't afraid to use his body and his size to create opportunities for himself, either offensively or defensively. Yeah. So, sorry.
No, yeah, I think from a standpoint, I mean more so of like taking over a game physically, where you notice some of Jamie Benn is as a good example. And I know he's a bit taller than McTavish, but Jamie Benn in his prime, and even this year, when you look at how the modern day power forward and those guys can just take over a game physically and just be dominant, right? Like, I think he has the potential to be that player, and we saw shades of it this year. But he's got the skill, he's got the shot to be a 30-plus goal scorer in this league and just be a physically dominant player, whether that's at the center position or at the wing. You're more so than any rookie in a sense. Like, even with Zegras, when we saw him come in, you knew what you were going to get. Very skillful player, but it was raw a lot of times, and you didn't exactly know, in a sense, where he was going to fit, whether he was going to be at center or at wing, and what you were going to get from him on a nightly basis. The thing that was maybe a bit more comfortable in a sense, and this isn't trying to slight Zegras, about McTavish is like you just really saw like a nice base for him to build on of what you can expect. Right? He really grew into some specific roles for this team as like a physically imposing center or winger forward for this team, a guy who's going to fight hard in the corners, get in front of the net, be that net front presence, be the trigger man on the power play, where as the season went on, he just kind of added these little next steps to his game that you can see, like the development was evident throughout the season, right? And kind of what you can expect from him next year. And that just kind of plays more into his game, right? He is a bit more reserved and has a bit more structure to his game and what you kind of expect from him, whereas Zegras is kind of a wild card in what you're going to get, and that's what you want from Trevor Zegras, don't get me wrong. But I do really think McTavish's rookie season has flown under the radar a little bit because there were some high expectations. I think at the start of the season, it was him and Matty Beniers who had the highest kind of percentages and odds to win the Calder Trophy, and Beniers kind of just started hot and had some hot streaks here and there that took him above where McTavish could get to. But, again, like I said, almost 20 goals, 43 points, led the team in power play goals, established his role throughout the season, got better and better as the season went on, more comfortable. It's a nice place to be in as a Ducks fan to look at what you can expect from him next year, where he's going to get more minutes. And he's going to be able to, know exactly what role he's going to build into next year. It's not going to start the season with a blank slate and say, okay, you're on power play 2, and we don't really know where we're going to put you and what you're going to expect. No, we know what we're going to get, and we know where we're going to put you. Whether it's it's going to be a new head coach, I don't think that matters. The numbers and the way he played this year kind of speak for themselves. He's really just kind of ironed out and chiseled out a real good role and spot for him to build on for next year.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, he's, like you said, he just kind of grew into it. And I think your comment about you just see a more stable base makes a lot of sense because, like you said, the thing that you saw from Zegras that you're looking for and why he's special is that spontaneity, is that creativity, is that kind of that looseness and that lack of fear of the moment. And with McTavish, what you were kind of hoping for is to see somebody kind of come in and bring maybe a little bit more of a structured presence down the center, and that's exactly what he did. And he does it without sacrificing any offensive upside. He, I have a hard time thinking he's not the 1C in the future just because he looks like a first-line center. He plays like a first-line center. I mean, as long as the production, it continues to progress in the way that we kind of think it will, there's no reason he's not a first-line center in this league for a long time. And again, like I said, I think the worst-case scenario at this point is he's a really good second-line center. And that's awesome. And it's, I did a kind of a playoff preview podcast with some people from old SB Nation sites and stuff. And one of the things that I was joking about was just like, I'm so glad I didn't have to care about the Calder race this year. Like, I just kind of got to be like, oh yeah, Mason McTavish had a real nice year. He did lots of things that I'm very excited about and very enjoyed. And also, I don't have to worry about the dog and pony show of, well, is this, is Mo Sider versus this, but also Michael Bunting, and then Jeremy Swett, and there's all this shit. And it was just like, oh yeah, no, I just got to watch McTavish be a good hockey player and enjoy it. What for you was kind of a notable surprise, either positively or negatively? What was something like that you kind of came out of this season with like, oh.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one because, like, the one thing I kind of started this with before too is for me, at least with this season, there wasn't anything majorly unexpected, right? You know, McTavish had a decent rookie season. Terry and Zegras led the team in scoring. The guys we acquired kind of did what we thought they would, and the guys who weren't sure if they'd take a step forward really didn't. You know, talking about guys like Comtois and Max Jones in a sense, Isaac Lindstrom, right? So there wasn't anything majorly surprising, but I will say I think it'd be more so on the goaltending side of things. And I know this was, you know, historically a bad team defensively, and they were always going to be kind of thrown to the wolves. But not so much the struggles of John Gibson, but being able to see a guy like Lucas Dostal come up and do well, and have that kind of success with how much the team struggled this year, and to see, you know, all the kind of rumors swirling around John Gibson. I think that was like the major surprise this year, because again, like I said, everything kind of fell into line as expected, and the big question mark defensively for this team is what was going to happen with the goaltending. And I'm not blaming John Gibson here and saying I'm surprised he was so bad. I was just surprised that things went the way they did, you know, with Gibson and Stolarz and eventually Dostal coming up. I expected things to maybe go a little bit differently, so I was a bit surprised with how things kind of shook out in the end with the goaltending for the Ducks. And that's more so, like I said, just because everything else kind of fell into place in like a normal realm, if that.
Everything else ended kind of where you expected it.
Yeah, it wasn't, and not even like in terms of my predictions, but just if you had shown me this kind of season leaders and the stats and everything at the beginning of the season, I'd have been like, okay, like, that makes sense. You know, nothing is jumping off the page there for me. And the closest thing to maybe doing that is Cam Fowler, but we can just, all you have to do is watch the season and dive into why his numbers were a little bit higher. Well, Klingberg didn't pan out, and he became power play one for a while and kind of ate up a lot of those numbers and inflated his numbers a bit. Not to say he didn't have a good season, but that kind of boosted the numbers to where they were, where he had his career high in points at 48. So even that, you can explain why they're a little bit higher, right? So I would have to say the goaltending, but not by any major surprise, if any.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, Klingberg being a bit of a disappointment. But I also think Jamie Drysdale getting hurt and missing the whole year, you know, really gave Cam even more opportunity to be in the power play one and to play even straight minutes and all that kind of stuff. The goaltending thing kind of makes sense. I think, you know, for me, as far as the goaltending is concerned, like I almost just like kind of wrote it off all year, just because I don't expect anybody to be able to perform at a consistently high level with that level of team defense in front of them. I just, you know, I think I saw, for me, right, and this is just for me, I saw enough flashes from all of the goalies that I'm kind of totally fine with the goalies. Like, I'm just like, oh yeah, I saw they played well enough here and there that I know they can still be like in Gibby's case, he can still be that guy. In Dostal's case, I am no longer. I've seen him be a really good goalie, right? Like make good saves, do things like that. And that for me was just enough to kind of get me by with them, because again, like that defense was just a fucking train wreck. For me, the surprise for the season was just how much I love Frank Vetrano.
Yeah.
I just fucking enjoyed the shit out of him, man. Like, he's feisty as hell. And, you know, I've joked about it 100 times, but, like, I love that the moment he gets the puck, he shoots. Like, it's awesome. He is just getting them up. He does not care. He's like, I'm on this team to shoot.
Yeah. Shooting's
what I'm going to do. You know, and I genuinely expect him to take, like, half-court shot next year. Yeah. Like, just multiple. Like, because he just loves to get him up, and he gets into the middle of everything. I've never seen someone try so hard to jump on other people's backs as consistently as he tried to. He was a real bright spot for me for this year, just in so much as an unexpected benefit, right? Because, you know, the guys like we talked about already, we were looking to them to do those things. I wasn't expecting Vetrano to come in and be a massive shit stirrer. You know what I mean? Like, I just didn't really see that coming. And so to get that guy and to get him in like kind of, that kind of package where he's just fucking sticking his nose into everything and he's undersized and he's feisty as hell. Like he was a blast. He was absolutely one of the highs of the season for me.
Yeah, just a real competitor. And I think like when we talked about him in the season preview too, we said like, I think you probably said this. You just mentioned it now. Like he's coming in to shoot the puck because nobody else on this team does. And you look at the fact he had 231 shots, which is over 50 more than the next highest player on the team. He came in, did what you wanted him to do, put up 22 goals on the season, and then did everything else. Was just a competitor, was a feisty player. Stuck up for his teammates. Played kind of with this edge to his game. I think he had like 86 hits too, which was fairly high on the team among forwards. I think it might have been the highest on the team among all forwards as well. So other than Sam Carrick, so he just kind of did a bit of everything. And yeah, I would agree that one of the more fun players to watch in a surprising sense. Like we knew what we're going to get in terms of wow factor and exciting play from Zegras and Terry, but from Vetrano, just kind of you were never upset when he was on the ice. He was always doing something interesting and competing hard and playing the right way. So maybe I'll revise my answer a bit of the surprising. I think looking again at the power play numbers, a bit surprising the power play was so bad with the expectations, and a lot of that comes down to John Klingberg not panning out and the Ducks really not figuring out an identity on the power play until later on in the season. But second worst power play is probably not where I would have earmarked them to finish, with the first unit being Zegras, Terry, Vetrano, Strome, Henrique, McTavish being in that mix with John Klingberg. I expected it to just not be significantly better, but definitely not the second worst power play in the league.
No, you would have hoped they'd finish in the low 20s or teens even, as opposed to the fucking bottom. And again, like we were saying at the beginning of this, and like we've said all this year and all of last year, if the Ducks are ever going to take a surprising step forward, maybe before they're actually ready, it will be on the back of goaltending and power play. Because at 5-on-5, they just don't have the guys yet, right? We're seeing these kids become these guys and grow into these roles and continue to develop, but they're not there yet. This draft in May 8th is, well, I'll save that for a second. Damn it, I completely got distracted by the May 8th thing.
Haven't we all?
So I completely lost my train of thought. I'm just going to go straight to it. Is May 8th of this year already a top 10 most important day in franchise history?
Yeah, I would say yes, just because of the caliber of prospect that Connor Bedard is. If you put the draft lottery when the Ducks could have got Sidney Crosby in that mix, then it's the same thing, right? Like it is the same type of situation where you knew what type of prospect Sidney Crosby was at the time, that he was a generational prospect and was being touted as that, and the next best thing since Wayne Gretzky, right? That was a pivotal moment in franchise history that didn't pan out the way that they wanted. Bobby Ryan was a great player for the Ducks, but he's not Sidney Crosby, right? So the same thing I think goes for this as well. Is Adam Fantilli, Matvei Michkov, Leo Carlsson are great players, but what Connor Bedard has done and what people expect him to do at the National Hockey League, again, similar to how Crosby was the best player since Gretzky, Bedard is the best player to come into the draft by a mile since Connor McDavid, right? Like he has just done things that you don't do at that level, that nobody's done at that level. So May 8th is extremely important. And again, I know I see a lot of people out here, and it's for good reason, and I do share the sentiment a little bit, saying, oh, if we don't get Connor Bedard, you've still got some great players. And that's true. That is 100% true. Adam Fantilli is a great player. Leo Carlsson is a great player. If the Ducks get them, you should be more than happy. But there's something to be said about there should still be some disappointment there if you don't get first overall and miss out on Connor Bedard, because that's been the talk all season. The Ducks lost 13 games to end the season to get the best odds at getting this guy. The talk has been about this guy. There has been no debate for this entire season. There was a little bit at the end of last year with Michkov and Bedard, but there's been no debate this year. Connor Bedard has come into his draft year and somehow stepped it up and done unbelievable things. 70 goals in the WHL, almost 3 points per game in the playoffs for a team that shouldn't have even been there. They shouldn't even have been in the mix. I think he had 20 points in 7 games, 10 goals and 10 assists. And this is a kid who, came into this league as an exceptional status player. It was a year younger than everybody else. Came in at 15, and it's just been on the up and up. And to think what he did for Canada at the World Juniors, right? There's something to be said about generational prospects, and there aren't many, and there rarely are guys like this that become available. And if you're gonna pick a year to be bad, this is the year to do it. And May 8th is extremely important for the Ducks franchise to get them where you expect them to hopefully be in the future, where you want them to be. It would suck a lot to have the chance here and to watch Connor Bedard do amazing things at the NHL level for Columbus or Chicago or San Jose or Montreal, right? Whoever would end up winning the lottery. There would always be, as there has been with Crosby, there would always be that thought in the back of your mind of what if, right? What if the balls fell that way for us and you end up getting that player?
So here's the thing. I agree with 95% of what you just said. I will say I do think Adam Fantilli is good enough and better enough that getting second place is not as big of a hit as it was in the Crosby, right? I think Fantilli will I fully expect Fantilli to be better than Bobby Ryan.
I expect him to be better than some number 1 overalls that have gone in recent years. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, take Bedard out, act like he's not here, look at his resume, Fantilli's resume on its own. It's extremely impressive. There aren't many. There's 2 guys who've ever done what he's done. One of them is Paul Kariya, one of them is Jack Eichel, winning a Hobey Baker as a freshman. The numbers that he put up this year for Michigan were a joke.
He did it as a draft year freshman, right? It's not even like a Luke Hughes thing, right? Where he gets drafted and then he goes to college and he has a great year or anything like that. This is just preternatural, special. And it's funny. I don't know who I was talking to this about. I was talking to somebody and I was saying, it might have been you actually. But it makes it, to me, it's the most incredible testament to how special Connor Bedard is that Adam Fantilli is this good, this big, this fast, this skilled, and he's not even pushing for
There's
first.
no talk at all,
There's no talk. And I think that should not be seen as a knock on Fantilli. I think that should be seen as an extra bit of context and emphasis to just how special Connor Bedard seems. And I think that's very cool.
It's why I half agree with what everybody's saying, and that yes, you do get some good players if you miss out on Bedard, but the fact that Fantilli is putting up historic numbers that not anybody does in the NCAA and is nowhere close, the fact that Matvei Michkov is having one of the best under 18 years in Russian hockey history and it's nowhere close to the discussion. Leo Carlsson's having one of the best, I think, under 18 years in SHL history, nowhere close to the conversation. I agree with you're going to get a great player if you don't get number 1, but the fact that these guys are doing this and potentially all 3 of those guys could be number 1s in other draft classes and they're not even getting in the conversation to be number 1 overall just tells you how special Connor Bedard is and what he's doing.
Yeah, and I'm secretly hoping that they trade for a second pick and we get Matvei Michkov, I think it was Sam Cosentino, who obviously a super reliable source and really plugged in guy. Said that he's hearing that there are teams who said they think Michkov will fall to the second round. And
there's
Can
there's
you
enough teams
fucking
that
imagine
have multiple
getting
first-round picks.
Matvey Michkov with the 33rd pick? Like, I thought getting, who was it, Brad Lambert with the 30th pick last year? Something like that. Like, that was incredible enough to me. The idea of getting Michkov, like, there's no way Michkov makes it past 10.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, Lambert fell because he struggled in his draft year. Michkov did not struggle at all. He was putting up.
Well, he struggled when he struggled at the beginning of the year.
With St.
and
Petersburg.
Then he moved to Sochi.
Yeah, because
but he also wasn't getting an opportunity.
he got the Russian, the young kid Russian KHL treatment where they don't play you at all, no matter how good you are. And then he moved to Sochi, and they played him in good situations, top 6 on the power play. And what do you know? He produced, and he put up almost a point per game in the KHL, which you do not see from players that age. So.
No, look, I love Michkov. I still think he's the second best prospect in this draft class.
Yeah, on pure upside, it's
just pure potential.
Yeah.
I just think he's so special, and I would have absolutely no issue taking him. But I do think it is hard to argue with Bedard Fantilli 1-2. Just because of the skill level, because of the timelines, all that kind of stuff. I think. I still think you can easily justify Michkov over Carlson, just because I do think that raw potential is so insanely high.
Yeah.
But I do think those first two are those first two, and then it'll be about what happens after that and seeing where it comes out.
Yeah, I see a lot of places like he could go. Like Arizona has 2 picks potentially in the top 12. They have 6 and 12 right now because Ottawa's pick they have. So I think they're a team who could take a swing on him. Yzerman in Detroit right now. Detroit's at 9. If he falls to that point and they think he's significantly better, then I know they're now maybe looking at guys who are closer to the NHL because they are competing and are getting better. But Yzerman always likes to kind of go off the board and take the best player available. I could see San Jose, if they stay at 4 or drop down a little bit, they could potentially take him. Right, like they took William Eklund a couple years ago, so I could see them potentially taking Michkov, and their rebuild is just starting, and thinking, okay, we'll wait a couple years, and they seemingly had no issues with the whole Russian factor, right? Because they played, there was an issue. What was the issue with they played a game in Sweden or something, the Sharks did, and they didn't want their Russian, the Sweden or someone didn't want their Russian players playing, but
they played a game in Prague.
Right, yeah, and they
didn't want the Russian players to play. Yeah,
and they said, well, too bad. So I mean, clearly it doesn't that doesn't affect them too much. So I could see that as a place where he goes. I mean, I wouldn't love to see it because I don't want to see him end up in San Jose because I do think he's going to be an exceptional player. But I do agree with you. Like there are. 1-2 for me is still Bedard Fantilli. No matter how much, even though I agree with you, and I think Michkov is the second best player on pure upside in this draft, the certainty of knowing Bedard and Fantilli could be there next year, or at least in the year after that, and that you're going to be able to work them into your roster sooner, and they're for sure that they're going to come over and play. I think there's something to be said about that. But once you get into the conversation of Michkov versus Carlson or Michkov versus Benson and those guys, I think on pure upside you could say, okay, well, we'll take the risk and we'll take Michkov. So I could see a team like San Jose or like Arizona or Detroit, pulling that trigger. There's absolutely no way to me he falls into the second round or even outside the top 15. Like I just can't see it.
I don't think it'll happen. I think there's too many teams. Like I think there's too many teams that aren't supposed to be in the draft lottery this year that if they get to him, or if he gets to them, they're taking him immediately, no question.
Yeah, you think Pittsburgh, you think
Washington.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, shit, if you're Philadelphia, are you...
St. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, teams that shouldn't be here.
St. Louis is one of the few teams you could talk me into going after... maybe like a Will Smith, but he won't be there. What's his Axel Sanderson Palika, I think is that kid. But like a couple of these kids, Einbacher,
Gabe Perreault, maybe as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, we're gonna have to this summer. I'm sure we'll do. 1 or 2
after the draft lottery.
because I can't wait to talk about I can't wait to talk about Zach Benson, who I consider to be one of the more interesting prospects this year.
I love that, like, our draft preview this year will be more so just talking about other players and what other teams can get, because unless we fall to 3, like, that's where we'll be able to actually have a debate. Obviously, I don't hope that happens, but then we'll be obviously debating Carlson and Benson and Michkov and whoever. But yeah, if we land at 1-2, like, there's no debate. We already both are kind of on the same page there. Maybe you could talk at 2 is, would you take Michkov over Fantilli? But we've kind of already laid that to rest a little bit. So ideally, we go into our draft preview knowing the Ducks are going to get Bedard, and then we just have fun with the rest of the teams and fits. And
that's what I'm saying. So. Like, I'm just, like, so excited to not actually have to care about how good Andrew Crystal is.
Yes.
I don't. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I hope so.
Because he's not going to end up in Anaheim unless there's a trade, right? Like, I just don't have to know.
Yeah.
It's so comfort. It's so warm.
The one thing I have to say now, we're not going to do, I'm not going to stream the draft lottery this year. I can't. Because every time we've done it, I've been behind, and then I end up finding out soon. I can't do that. I'm going to be too stressed this year to do it. I can't. So, no, we're not doing that this year. I'm putting that
that's
to rest.
We may have to do an immediate live pod that night on Twitch or something.
Yeah, if we win, for sure. If not, I'm going to bed, and I'm just going to pretend it never happened.
If we win, you're never hearing from me again. I'm just going to go move into the Honda Center, and I'm just going to live there.
I'm running to Regina, or I guess no, he's probably back in Vancouver. I'm running to Vancouver to pick him up myself and drive him to Honda Center just to make sure nothing happens. He can stay with Pat and Jason until the draft just to make sure he makes it in time.
Connor Bedard, welcome to your Belinda.
All right, well, the other big news, I guess, I don't think we have anything draft now because we'll get into that obviously after the lottery. It's not big news because we knew this was going to happen, or we expected this to happen at the end of the season. But Dallas Eakins' contract was not renewed. He was let go, fired, contract expired, whatever you want to call it. He's not head coach at the Anaheim Ducks anymore. The quotes from Verbeek were, he said 3 reasons why this happened. He wanted a fresh start, wanted a new voice, wanted a different direction. They're all kind of one of the same thing, right? Like,
it's the exact same fucking thing. Like, it was very, very funny to listen to that little press scrum.
Yeah.
And him go, yeah, I mean, it came down to 3 things, this. I'm like, oh, so it came down to one thing.
Yeah. Yeah, you just wanted a new coach, which is fine. He wasn't your guy.
No, no issue with it. I just, it's very funny to me because that is a very human thing to try to make your reason sound a little bit bigger and more broad than perhaps it actually is, even if your reason is perfectly valid. It's just natural to be like, well, I mean, there were a couple of different factors. It's like, no, like, it was time to move on.
Yeah.
That's that simple.
Yeah. No, and that's exactly it. Like, it was time for the Ducks to move on. And it's an easy split, right? You're not firing him per se. The contract was up. You could let him go. And we talked about this all year and at the beginning of last year too. Like, it just seemed like it was meant to be. It was going to happen unless the Ducks like magically crept into the playoffs that you could say, okay, like maybe. But when you finish dead last, like there was absolutely no way they were going to give him a new contract and bring him back. So nothing's happened. Nobody's been replaced yet. The only hiring that's come in is the Ducks have named it's Matt McIlvain, right, as the AHL head coach for the San Diego Gulls. So that is a guy that I know a few people had on their radar for the head coach job for the Ducks, but rarely does that happen. We've talked Ricard Grönberg into the ground as being an option for the Ducks in their head coaching job. Rarely do you see a guy come over, even with the success both of them have had in Europe, and jump right into an NHL head coaching job. It just doesn't happen. But great hire. A lot of potential there for him to be a head coach in the National Hockey League. And listen, it shows the thought process from Verbeek that he is thinking, forward thinking here. Trying some new things out, bringing in some guys from different backgrounds and different atmospheres to say, okay, like, we've got a plan in place here. We want to see what this guy can do. Not ready by any means to jump into an NHL head coaching job as much as some people would love to think he is. He's young. Let's give him a chance, see what he can do. There's going to be a lot of young, exciting players coming to San Diego. If he does well and things don't pan out, I don't think you're thinking this, but if things don't pan out on the NHL side with whoever you hire, you've got a guy in your system that you like and you're confident in that he could be an NHL head coach, right? So there's some thought process there, at least behind the signing.
So, the Dallas thing.
Yeah, I skipped ahead there a bunch, but
No, it's fine. We, like you said, we've been talking about this all year. It was what we all expected, and again, I think it made the most sense to just get exactly again. As much as I'm making fun of Pat Verbeek for making one thing into three things,
sure.
he's 100% right. It was absolutely right to try and just get a whole new fresh start, especially with the season ending the way it did, and in a weird sense, very positively, because it's like, okay, we know we're getting one of these three guys. We know we're going to. We also finished with the worst team in the league, so there's no reason that you can't even lie to yourself in a sense of like, well, we should actually bring this guy back. It's like this is so easy to just everybody walk away and get a fresh start. I want nothing but the best for Dallas Eakins. I genuinely like that guy. I think he seems like a really, really good dude. I think he has his priorities in order. And I really hope he's able to find a spot for himself, whether that be in the AHL or as a college coach or, a development staff person, kind of thing like that. I want nothing but the best for that man. As for the Matt McIlvaine thing, I have seen a lot of people talk about him being a forward-thinking and progressive hire. And my question is, other than the fact that he's only 37, what is making people say that?
Yeah.
Does any and I don't. This is one of those things where I just sound like I'm being an asshole, and I guess I kind of am, but I'm not trying to be. What does anybody actually know about how he approaches things that they are looking at him as a young, forward-thinking hockey coach, other than, again, he's 37 and he was coaching in Europe?
Yeah, there's a couple videos, but again, produced by Red Bull, by the Red Bull group, so of course they're not going to be negative. There's an article that was shared that is a good article, and it goes into depth a little bit about his journey and his coaching style and career and everything. But again, it's nothing revolutionary. He's not. I always fall into soccer here, right? That's exactly where I was going to go, and I try not to. But he's not. Like, he's not a tactician. He's not some genius that's bringing a new approach of thinking to the game of hockey and is revolutionizing, European hockey and with his approach to, whatever, playing 3 defensemen and 2 forwards or some bullshit like that. Like, I'm not trying to bag on the guy. He's had success in Europe. He's won back-to-back championships with Red Bull Salzburg. He, was a part of the Red Bull group in Munich, and with their team as an assistant coach, winning back-to-back championships there. So he's had pedigree of success. He's young.
100%. I want to be very clear. Yeah. I am not questioning his credentials or his legitimacy or anything like that. What I am questioning is the people that I have seen say things about this hiring that I would like to know what makes them say that. I have no beef with Matt McIlvaine. I hope he's exactly the guy everybody seems to think he is. You know what I mean? I just feel like everybody has been so excited about this guy that I wonder how many of us had heard of all that long ago.
Yeah. The one thing
maybe his name has been out there and I haven't heard it.
Yeah.
I don't want to act like I'm, the sole fucking guardian of all things hockey coaching and some of that shit. It's been very surprising how aggressive the praise of this decision has been, given that it feels like it kind of just came out of nowhere, other than one of the thoughts in 32 Thoughts, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, and it just kind of materialized from there. I know, like, in from what I've read in coaching circles and teams who've looked into, like, unique hires, I guess you could say, right? Because he isn't in the traditional circuit of NCAA or AHL, even, junior hockey. He's way on the outside, where a lot of these guys, and we had our interview with Ricard Gromberg and even touched on this and talked to him about it. It's like it's a lot harder for them to come over and get opportunities and jump right into the NHL. A lot of times it's into the AHL. You get your start there and you have to kind of grind your way up. It's similar to how NCAA guys a lot of times have to do that and do the same thing. But the one thing I will say, like, and I know this is from soccer, and I don't know the structure, with hockey and how the Red Bull group handles hockey, but I know from soccer they tend to hire the right people and the smart guys. They tend to take chances, hire younger guys and they do things the right way. They tend to. So I would hope that this is the case with him, but again, there isn't much to kind of go on other than he's young, he's had success with a team that maybe is supposed to have success, right? Like,
I don't know.
That's the thing.
That's my thing.
Is we see this again with the Austrian league. Red Bull Salzburg is always a good team. They're supposed to be a good team. They're well funded. That's not a detriment to him. He's part of that situation. He still has to lead them to victory. He has a 650 win percentage, 94 wins, 42 losses, 94, 42, 22, and 19 record, and a 31-8 record in the postseason. Gets credit for that 100%.
Absolutely.
Right. But Red Bull Salzburg and Red Bull Munich, they win a lot. And a lot of that is the coaching staff for sure and hiring the right people. And a lot of that is just because they are well backed and well funded and they're a great team to go to.
They have an infrastructure, exactly.
They are in major cities in those countries and they have a good setup to win a lot. So I just like to preface that with this. Again, I love the signing. I think it's a really shrewd move to bring a guy like that. It's a tough decision to make, right? To step out of like the comfort zone of hiring the retreads or, from the normal tracks and avenues you go to bring coaches in. So in that sense, I do like it. But yeah, we do have to cool our jets a little bit and stop maybe acting like this guy is again Pep Guardiola, like the next like young John Cooper or something out of nowhere. It's tough to. I feel like that's what we've got into lately, and that's what I've seen a lot of. And there isn't much backing that other than a few positive articles about his approach and the way he handles the game and the success he's had at a young age. And that's it, right? Like that's all we're backing it on. So it's very tough to sit here and say, oh, yeah, no, this guy's going to be the Ducks head coach in 5 years, so they should bring in an older guy to kind of just hold the ship until he's ready to go. There is absolutely no guarantee he figures this out. It's a completely different game, a completely different style of hockey, a completely different approach. He's got to go into the AHL first, figure that out with a team that isn't really that good. They're going to get an injection of young players, but the Gulls were not good last year. And there's no guarantee Lucas Dostal is going to be a part of that team next year, and that's going to be a big loss for them. So he's going to have to figure that out with a team that's not as good as the team that he has been coaching in a different league,
especially within a comparative context.
Yeah, and then there's
right, like you were saying, the Red Bull teams are the Red Bull teams. They have the money and the infrastructure to perform well. And again, like you said, even with all that money, you still have to perform. We've seen well-backed and well-funded organizations fail. I'm not trying to, look, fucking PSG is right there. But
it's a lot easier to have success with a team that is backed like that. And again, that's not a detriment to what he's done, but it is a lot easier to have that where you do have to take that success with a grain of salt and say, well, yes, but they are well put together, well funded, they recruit well, they recruited him well, but there's a lot of other pieces that go into that success. It's not like he took a team that is normally bad from the bottom, changed things up, with a certain style and kind of just whipped them into shape and won with them, right? Dragged them to a championship with his coaching style. That's not really the case here per se. Might be, but there are other things that you can look at with these two teams that he's had success with and say, okay, these are also contributing factors to that, is that they are well-run, well-funded. They do have the ability to recruit high-end players, and they are good a lot of the time.
No, absolutely. Look, I'll also say this. You mentioning a couple of minutes ago or whatever that he's not necessarily some schematic whiz kid is actually really reassuring to me. Because, like, I don't want I don't want a scheme dork. Like, I just don't think.
You don't
I
want like
don't.
that one coach in the French league where he doesn't even have his coaching license, but he got the job because he plays a lot of Football Manager. You
I
don't want
could
one of those
just.
guys.
I just don't want a scheme dork, man. Like,
Yeah.
I just don't want someone whose system is so entirely precious to the way that they
Yeah.
operate, right? Like, I just feel like, especially at the elite professional level, it is far more about managing players than it is about implementing systems. And
Especially in
I'm sure
hockey too.
a lot of people disagree with that, but exactly, I think, because I think I saw somebody be like, "Oh, he's kind of Sean McVay
Yeah.
vibes," and my thing was just like, I don't know that that's great, and I also don't know, like, the rigidity of football allows your scheme to be impactful in a way that simply isn't possible in hockey. Hockey is far more free flowing. Obviously, there's no stops and starts and stops and starts. It's not like, all right, everybody go get set and then we're going to start. It's just like, no, everybody just fucking go. And that's why, for me, I think, I think schemes need to be more philosophical than tactical,
Yeah. Out
and
out
about
coaching.
making sure guys understand their roles, what you're asking them to do. And again, like, this isn't to say that you can't be this and also be a scheme dork or whatever, but, like, I just, when people immediately start to talk about, let me say it this way, when I perceive the conversation to be about somebody being a tactical genius, I immediately get a little hesitant, because I just, again, don't know how much of a difference that actually makes in hockey.
You just don't
And
see it.
I think, yeah, you don't. I mean, because look, I can tell you right now who I think some of the best coaches in the league are. And I think there's one of the top 3 or 4 in my head who has a Stanley Cup. Like, because for me, it's Cassidy, uh, Brindamore, Cooper. Maybe you want to go Bednar. I don't disagree necessarily, but I mean, I might at this point say Jim Montgomery is a better coach than Jared Bednar is, maybe. You know what I mean? Like, I think Todd McClellan's a really good coach. He doesn't have a Stanley Cup. Like, and these are guys who have gotten a lot out of the teams that they're coaching, but the teams that they are coaching are good, and they are not simply, again, just tacticians. These are guys who understand people.
Yeah. Man
And I just
management,
think that
player
matters. Man
management,
management, exactly.
managing a game. Managing a game is a lot different than, tactically setting up your team in a way to succeed. It just doesn't, it's just not the same, right? Like, when we're talking soccer and to some extent football as well. And even basketball more so. And I know it's not, you can't. It's a bit closer to hockey and, like, not really being able to, like, tactically set up and scheme. But there's a lot more you can do there, right? Where you can change things up and try different things. It's just like, there really isn't that much you can do and that many changes you can make. And I haven't ever looked at a coach in hockey and said, wow, tactically he just outclassed, the opposing coach and the opposing team there. There are decisions you can make in managing a game, and we've seen that in a lot in this series with Tampa and Toronto in the playoffs now, where you said, okay, like, Cooper managed the game properly here. He did a few things where, threw the fourth line out there at the right time and did this and that, but that's not tactics as much as it is managing a game and managing people and managing players and doing things at the right moment. It's just not the same type of game where you can set up a tactic and say, go out and we're going to do this and that's going to work. You can run plays and whatever, but it just doesn't work the same way. And that's the guy, what I feared we were running down this road with comparisons for McIlvain, is that we're painting him as this, like, revolutionary tactician with really not a lot of kind of proof to back it up and say that he is this and that he can do this and that's even possible. I think he's a great young coach. It's amazing what he's been able to achieve at only 37 at this point in Europe with some great teams.
Absolutely.
I'm excited that the Ducks brought him into their system and are giving this guy a chance, again, from a non-traditional kind of hiring standpoint. I would love for him to fulfill the expectations that people have put on him already of being the next Ducks head coach in the next 3 years and leading them to a Stanley Cup. That would be great. But
nothing would make me happier.
None of this in any way, shape, or form should impact who they hire as their head coach. I don't care that everybody and a lot of people, and even Pat Verbeek, think that this guy could be the next thing. I don't even think Pat Verbeek cares that he thinks this guy could be the head coach in 3 years. It should have no impact on who they hire now. They shouldn't go out and hire a veteran, more experienced coach to fill the hole until they think this guy is ready. Because the reality of the situation is, and it's a big if, he might never figure it out. He might never make it. Like, there's a real chance that just never happens. And he just never becomes the next coach of the Ducks. You can't base your decision on that.
No, 100%. And there's a second thing that I think that also matters here, especially with, as everybody loves to remind us, aging curves. You can't light these early years on fire. You can't. You have to be building something, right? Even if you're tanking. This year they were building something. And you have to find the next guy who's going to help carry that on and start to build something with this team. But you need to start getting results. We're about to get major contract extensions for probably Zegras, definitely Terry. Jamie Drysdale needs a new contract. Mason McTavish just spent the first year of his ELC. Looks like he's going to get a big contract when he's finally up. We are starting to enter the part where it's like, let's see if we can maybe make some surprising, steps here. I don't expect them to be a playoff team next year. I don't even necessarily expect them to be a playoff team in 2 years. But I do think that within 2 years, they should be closer to the wild card than last. And a lot of that is going to be about who they bring in and what he what the new head coach thinks the right decision making is and where to put these guys and how to use them and stuff. And, you can't make that decision with I only need them to be there for 3 years because I've got this other kid. Because one, like you said, you can't guarantee that he's going to be ready to make the move or that he'll even be able to make the move. And two, you just can't burn the years. I just don't think you can spend these 22 through 24, 25 years for some of these guys hoping that a prospect in San Diego who's not a player puts it all together.
No, it's tough. I had the people I was trying to pull up here, but we got to look at some coaching candidates for who the Ducks could bring in.
For the record, before we get into this list, I just want to say Eddy put this list together. I did not put this list together.
All right, fair. I put this list together scraping through the internet at potential options, and then I picked a few out. So there.
Jets quarterback Joe Flacco.
Yeah.
That's an interesting choice. Spencer Tracy, Fonte Leach.
You got to throw Tamu in there too, right?
No,
always.
sorry. Yeah, exactly.
Surprised he didn't make
everybody's favorite guy right now.
My list should have just been Tamu, Paul, Scotty.
I mean, look, if we're being honest, the bottom three names are the best names on this list.
Oh, yeah, the veterans.
All right, so read your list, Ed.
Okay, so we'll go from top to bottom. We'll get to the best three at the end. So I pulled this again from list of guys, top candidates available, young upcoming coaches, blah, blah, blah. But the names we have on the candidates list are Joe Sacco, current assistant coach for the Boston Bruins since 2014, was a coach for the Colorado Avalanche for 4 years, made the playoffs once, wasn't a great stint in his first coaching job. Andrew Burnett, who we've talked about multiple times, former interim coach for the Florida Panthers, current assistant coach for the New Jersey Devils. Despite the, I don't want to say legal issues or police issues or whatever,
he got a DUI over All-Star. He got a DUI over All-Star weekend.
Yeah,
he was in South Florida and he got a DUI.
Ran a couple stop signs in a golf cart. Was kind of a dick about it. Yeah, but he was drunk.
He got a DUI, and I don't know what to do with that. It's something that I've been thinking about literally since it happened because, this is the NHL, and we know the way that the league operates. But I also wonder if he's a guy that they just sit on for another coaching cycle. I don't know. So, anyways, sorry.
No, it's a tough one for sure.
But that's what it is, because if it wasn't for the DUI, I don't think anybody would think he would still be in New Jersey next year. And at this point, I would say it might even be more likely he's in New Jersey next year than he leaves.
Okay. Next one was Spencer Carberry, current assistant coach for the Toronto Maple Leafs. A little bit younger, I guess, on the coaching side of things. He's only 41. Was, I think, interviewed for the Caps job, or was thought highly for the Caps job at one point. He was the head coach for the Hershey Bears for a while, won ECHL Coach of the Year in 2014, won AHL Coach of the Year in 2021. Washington apparently wanted to keep him on in their system, but he took the assistant coach job with the Leafs, and he's taken over the Leafs power play as the assistant coach, and Toronto had the league's second best power play unit behind, of course, Edmonton this year. So a lot of buzz around him, a good potential option if the Ducks want to go for kind of like that up-and-coming younger coach who's had some success in the more traditional,
right,
coaching stints, the ECHL to the AHL. He's made that progression upwards. Now he's an assistant coach at the NHL level. The next step for him is hand the reins to a team, and get a head coaching job. Same thing kind of for the next one, Jay Leach, who's an assistant coach or part of the coaching staff for the Seattle Kraken, was the head coach of the Providence Bruins before that. Helped coach some of the Bruins' top defensemen now, Charlie McAvoy, Jeremy Lauzon, Connor Clifton. He's going to get a job at some point, and he's done a good job with the Kraken too. I mean, they made the playoffs, right? So he's done a good job there as being part of that coaching staff. Mike Vellucci is another one. Where is he? Yeah, was current assistant coach for the Pittsburgh Penguins. A little bit on the older side, and every article I read on this guy was they were surprised he hasn't been given a head coaching job. He's been interviewed for a few positions, but he's currently an assistant coach to Mike Sullivan. Coached the Charlotte Checkers when they were just on a tear in the AHL for a couple years. Won the Calder Cup in 2019 and was named AHL Coach of the Year for that season. Interviewed for the Bruins head coaching job, interviewed for the Flyers head coaching position, and likely will be getting a few calls this season, obviously with the Ducks and a few other teams, Columbus, and I think I'm trying to remember who else is looking for a head coach. A few teams are looking for a head coach right now, so he'll be in that mix. I threw in Ricard Gronberg just for the sake of it. I absolutely don't think that's going to be the case, because if they were going to give a head coaching job to somebody with that type of resume, it probably would have been McIlvain. They would have just given him the head coaching job instead, because Ricard Gronberg has a fairly similar resume to what McIlvain does, coaching in the Austrian League for ZSC Lions, former coach at many different levels with Swedish hockey. So again, I threw him in there just because we've talked about him for a very long time, but I don't think he's going to be a guy that's considered. I threw in Jeff Blashill because he was the only link I could make for Verbeek being in an organization with a coach that is available right now. Blashill essentially switched positions with Lalonde, I think it is right now. Lalonde came from Tampa Bay and became the head coach of the Detroit Red Wings, and Blashill got fired and went to be an assistant coach with the Tampa Bay Lightning. So he's under John Cooper right now. Whether that helps him or not, I don't know. He got thrown under the bus a little bit with Detroit through the rebuild, similar to, in a sense, what Dallas Eakins had to go through with the Ducks. I think somebody will give him another shot at some point, because when he did come into the league with Detroit, he was highly thought of as being kind of a very good young coach. We'll have to see if that's the case. Again, I put him on there just for the link, just for the fact that Verbeek was an assistant general manager with the Red Wings at the time that Blashill was the head coach, so there is some connection there. And then your favorite three are the veterans on the list. For everybody who said that the Ducks should hire a kind of placeholder until McIlvain is ready, I had Bruce Boudreau, Peter Laviolette, who was just fired from the Washington Capitals, and Alain Vigneault, who was fired from the Philadelphia Flyers. So I had to throw those guys in there. You can't not include them.
Fired from the Philadelphia Flyers like 4 years ago, right?
2022. He was head coach of the Flyers for 2019 to 2022, so he was just recently fired, was he not? Yeah, last season. This season was his first year off as a head coach.
He was still in Philly last year.
He coached them to a 74, 54, and 19 record, 10-6 in the one playoff appearance that they went to. That they went in. So, not bad. And a very good record with the New York Rangers from 2013 to 2018. In fact, I mean his coaching resume is very good. Like his wins to losses ratio is very, very good with his 4 stints. Obviously Montreal way back, then the Canucks for almost 8 years, the Rangers for 5, and then the Flyers for 3. So again, yeah, I don't know. So I had to throw those guys in. Okay. Those are the veteran guys that are available. Bruce Boudreau is obviously the funniest one. That if he was to come back for a 3rd stint here, would be interesting.
2nd stint.
What?
2nd stint.
Is it?
How many times do you think we've hired Bruce Boudreau?
Why did I think he was here twice? Wow, that sucks. No, that was Randy Carlyle. Never mind. Wow. I was thinking Randy. I should have added Randy to this list. Jeez.
Oh God, that would have been fun. So do you have any? But like, who do you want?
Yeah, I think Andrew Burnett's still the number 1 choice, just because again he has a little bit more experience and success in that experience than some of these guys. Maybe not games played, but did some great things with the Florida Panthers.
Mm-hmm.
Helped really with the turnaround here for the New Jersey Devils and them becoming one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference this year. And it's a really good playoff series they're in right now with the Rangers. So he's a big part of that success as well. So I think he's still my number 1. Outside of that, like I'm finding it very hard to separate, Sacco and Carberry, Leach, Vellucci. Like they're all kind of in similar positions as assistant coaches in the National Hockey League right now who had success at the AHL level. They're all in that mix. Maybe Sacco's a bit more similar to like Blashill and stuff of having been a head coach at the NHL level before and now an assistant who's having success with a good team. So I would say Carberry, Leach, Vellucci are probably all tied in kind of second, because I'd rather have those guys and give a guy who hasn't had a chance yet a shot to see what he could do. So they're all kind of mixed there. I'm not really leaning one way or the other. They're again very similar resumes of having success at the AHL level, winning AHL Coach of the Year, going to and be an assistant with a team that's had success and made the playoffs. So they're all kind of right in that mix. That would be it for me. The rest of these guys on the list, I wouldn't be super psyched if we hired them. Sacco or Blashill, Boudreau, Laviolette, Vigneault. I don't think that's the direction the Ducks should be going in, but you got to throw those names in there because they're definitely possible. If the Ducks aren't going to go that younger, less experienced route, then those are definitely guys. If you're looking for a guy who's done it before or had experience as a head coach at the NHL level, those are the guys that are at the top of that list right now.
Yeah, I mean, maybe if we're really lucky, we'll hire Sergei Fedorov, who loves to pull his goalie in overtime like an insane person.
Oh, I love it.
But yeah, I think I'm with you. I think Andrew Burnett is the guy on that list that I would look at as being like, I would say the most comfortable handing the keys to a young team.
Yeah.
But I'm not even gonna lie, man. Second on my list is Bruce. I love Bruce Boudreau. I think he could do a lot of good for the franchise. I think he could come back and have an opportunity to really kind of re-cement his place as like the most beloved coach in Ducks history, right? Like he just meant so much to this franchise, and I get the ups and downs and the game sevens and all that stuff, but like I still think he's got it. I still think he wants it, and I just think that kind of up-tempo, high personality style of his would work really, really well with a young, skilled Ducks team. I really think that could be a good one. Laviolette, I like Peter Laviolette. I just don't know that we want a hard ass right now.
Yeah.
And the same thing goes for Alain Vigneault, who I don't know is necessarily much of a teddy bear. He's kind of He's kind of a prickly guy, based on everything I've heard.
I would have thrown Claude Julien into this mix, but it seems almost like a foregone conclusion that he's going to be the next coach of the Ottawa Senators, and they're just trying to figure out like their ownership situation and stuff. So,
that's so good for them. That'd be great.
Yeah, so that seems to be set in stone, and why his name's kind of been removed off a lot of lists. But like of all those other guys outside the four that I would like in the direction I would like the Ducks to go in, Bruce Boudreau would probably be at the top of my list about those other guys, just for you know what you're going to get from him. We have that history there with the organization. He's had success in the other places he's gone. He had some success early on with the Canucks as well, and a lot of people felt he was kind of unfairly let go in a short period of time from there. So,
he got totally hosed.
Yeah. So I mean I wouldn't hate it at all. Again, there are other options above that, but if the Devils don't let Brunette leave, or if he goes for a different option somewhere else, and if some of those the AHL or the assistant coaches that had success in the AHL, if the Ducks don't really want to go in that direction, I can't blame them, right? Like, it is taking a risk on guys like Carberry and Leach and Vellucci that you think they can be head coaches at the NHL level. So it's not the worst thing in the world if you're going to go Bruce. And I think that would appease a lot of people who do like McIlvaine and think he can be the head coach and believe in him a lot. Clearly Verbeek does as well, that he can be the head coach in the next 3 years. Then there really isn't a better short, stopgap option to bring in for the next couple of years than Bruce Boudreau, right? Like, that would probably be the best of the bunch of kind of a veteran guy to bring in for the next couple of years and pave the way for hopefully McIlvaine to take over when he hopefully has success at the AHL level, right? Like, that would be the guy.
Yeah, I mean, you're being much nicer about it than I am. I think if you're going to go a retread, you have to go with somebody like that. I would be more than open and happy to see them give somebody a first-time head coaching job. Who actually, thinking about it now, could be an interesting name is Travis Green, who was up for it the first time.
I almost added him in, I saw him on a few of them.
Yeah, he would be an interesting one because he got a little bit of a run, but he also got a bad rub out. He got a bad, nope, not going to make it better.
Yeah.
He got screwed a little bit, obviously, as everything went down in Vancouver. But Travis Green would be an interesting one. But yeah, I think if you're gonna just go with a dead ass retread, I think Bruce is the one, because I just think who he is as a person and who he is as a coach would be a huge lift to this franchise, especially for a franchise where Pat Verbeek seems to be more willing to talk to the fans.
Yeah.
Or communicate with the fans and kind of given it what, but he's not much more of a personality. And I think having somebody like Bruce Boudreau, who's going to be in front of the cameras and the mics every day, who has a good rapport with the media, who knows how to kind of keep things light, knows how to push buttons. He's been in big games, he's been in bad games. You know what I mean? He's kind of gone through it all. I think, all things considered, and this is absolutely an emotional choice, I think he would be the retread guy if that's really the way they want to go.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, listen.
Or we can just call Ken Hitchcock, see what he's doing.
Oh, yeah. Or Mike Babcock is what I've heard a few times.
Too. No, Ken Hitchcock. If we're going to get an asshole, let's at least get a good asshole.
Yeah. Now, ultimately, like, above all else, the direction I want them to go is Andrew Brunette. Like, that hasn't changed. Yeah. I think we've been on that almost all year of that being the option. For me, it's just kind of, well above the rest of the candidates as being the best option and the one of a nice mix of success at the NHL level compiled with, some potential there to be a solid head coach of a team that's hopefully going to be on the up and have a lot of young players. Again, with his young Florida Panthers team that he was the interim head coach of, and now with a young Devils team, he's dealt with a lot of the similar things that he would deal with as being the head coach of the Ducks. So that's it. That's my pick there. I don't have anything more really to say about the head coaching stuff. We can obviously we'll get into it more when we inevitably get a hire. I think it's going to have to be after the draft at this point, I would imagine.
Yeah,
I know. I think he mentioned in an interview he would ideally, in an ideal world, I'd like to get it in place before the draft, but there's no guarantee.
Yeah, I have a hard time thinking that they would do that without knowing who they're getting, but maybe the fact that it's one of 4 guys means that they actually don't actually have to care that much. So, yeah, I have a hard time seeing anything getting done before the lottery is announced. But I would expect somebody to be hired before the draft, because I think who they're going to want to keep, who they might want to move, is going to depend somewhat on who they bring in. So, yeah, I would say probably early to mid-June, I imagine, is when we'll get a hire.
Yeah,
so.
Let the draft lottery commence, kind of have an idea of what direction you're going to be going in there. And then next decision after that, obviously, it's not really any decision has to go into the draft lottery. It is just kind of like a big next point. You got to get over that hurdle, figure that out, get over that stress, and kind of know what the way things are going to shape out at the draft. Start thinking about that. Obviously, get the scouts are going to be on, if it's not number 1, on who they should get at 2 or 3, and that scouting department will be on that. Verbeek will be kind of looking into who are we going to deal at the draft and whatever. And I think then part of that conversation will shift in, okay, let's start narrowing down our head coaching search now and getting guys in for interviews and kind of getting this settled here, like you said, for mid to late June before the draft takes place. So, and then everything will be aligned, everything will be in place. So we'll see. I'm excited, man. It's an exciting offseason, a lot of change, a lot of things. Again, to look forward to the draft and a new head coach, and obviously a new head coach for the Gulls. A lot of new faces in on that side of things. So it'll be fun. It'll be fun. The Ducks fans are due for a little bit of fun after how stressful and how tough this season was.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I don't want to say that the bad stretch of it is completely behind us, because I don't think that's true, but I do think the worst of it is behind us.
Yeah.
And I really do think that ultimately, as disappointing as this season was, because, again, as much as we've been on the tank, nobody likes losing. Nobody likes having to watch these guys lose night after night after night. Nobody, it's not fun. It's not enjoyable. There's an objective, non-emotional, value to these losses, but this is still fundamentally a game played by people, and those things matter. And to feel like it's closer to being better than worse soon is real nice. So, I'm sure we'll have 1,000 different things to talk about. I'm sure we'll start to get lists of coaching candidates and stuff like that, as the playoffs go on and more guys get fired and teams step out and, what do you call it? Assistants become available to talk and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, for sure. A few of the guys we mentioned are, actually a majority of the guys we mentioned are still in playoffs with their teams, and you can't even, Leach is...
Who knows? Sheldon Keefe might be available.
He might be. If the Leafs bottle this 3-1 lead, then 100% he'll be available. Dude. I think Carberry's probably taken over for Keefe at that point, so... all right, let's wrap it with this. Who do you have coming out of the East? Who do you have coming out of the West? And who do you have winning the Stanley Cup? Because we haven't really talked playoffs too much.
Oh, man.
No series has been finished yet, so anything could still happen.
Fuck it. I will take Toronto in Colorado.
And
I will say Toronto wins.
See it.
And I will say Toronto wins.
Yeah.
I would love a Seattle run. That would be fun.
Seattle's
but
about to go up 3-2 in that series.
In the Western Conference.
They're up 3-1 right now.
Yeah, but Grubauer is going to turn into a pumpkin soon, man. He can't.
Well, Makar's also missing from this game too. All right, for me, I'm still on the Rangers. Still on the Rangers. I think they'll pull it out.
Look, I want them to win the Stanley Cup just so they can trade Jacob Trouba to Anaheim, because I want him in Anaheim. Yeah. But Other than that, I don't. Yeah,
I think
the
they'll be
Rangers
able
are
to
a
piece it
good one,
together,
man.
man. I think people saying they don't have it because the Devils have tied the series at 2. The Devils are a really good team. Like, they're not the
Yeah.
Devils of 2 years ago. Like, they're a really goddamn good team. They're the higher seed, I think, in this as well, right? So
Mm-hmm.
the Rangers thrashed them in games 1 and 2, 5-1 wins, an OT loss for the Rangers in game 3, and a 3-1 loss in game 4. A big game in New Jersey in game 5 will decide it. But I think if the Rangers get out, it's not an easy run by any means. You got to go through Boston, Toronto, Carolina. One of those teams or two of those teams to make it. But I think they come out there, and honestly, I think I'm gonna go with the Oilers, man. I think I'm gonna go with the Oilers. The Kings are a tough team to beat, and the Oilers are getting it done. And I look at the rest of these teams: the Kraken, the Avs, the Stars, the Vegas Golden Knights. Like, I think the Oilers have enough to get it done. I think the Rangers beat them in the Stanley Cup final, but I think the Oilers have enough. I don't have any confidence. I would say Colorado if they were fully healthy, but no Landeskog right now. Makar will be back. He's suspended for this game. No Nichushkin because he's out dealing with some personal problems. They've just been ripped apart. That roster has.
Yeah.
So I give it to the Oilers, man. I give it to them.
The Stars, I think, should get a real strong look.
Yeah.
As the other team who's got a real chance to come out of the West, because Jake Ottinger can steal you any game, and the team has gotten better. And I mean, have we heard anything more about Joe Pavelski?
No.
So other than that, I mean, there's a lot to like on that team.
Yeah. I debated heavily between the Stars and the Oilers, and ultimately just went with you got to go with McDavid and Draisaitl and that.
You got to go with Connor
and
McDavid.
I just think grinding through a round 1 series against LA and being able to get through that against one of the best defensive teams in the league this year, like that's just going to do wonders for them, I think, in moving forward. Like they have put up some very impressive games against the Kings to get this done. Close games, they've been able to hang in close games, so I'll give them credit.
Yeah.
All right.
So,
well, we made it, man. We made it back. We did it.
Yeah.
don't sound too excited.
Yeah. No, man, I'm glad. I just, it's just such a weird thing. The playoffs have been fun.
Mm-hmm.
The NBA playoffs are officially over, so I'm glad that I don't have to worry about that. Go Milwaukee. Beyond that, yeah, man, it's good to see you. Good to get back, and I'm sure we will have more than a few things to talk about and all sorts of dumb ideas to not record over the summer.
Yeah. I would say at the earliest, or maybe not the earliest, the most expected time for us to be back is around, May, either post-draft lottery May 8th or May 9th, May 10th. Around then is probably the next time you can definitely expect us to be back. Mm-hmm. Ideally, if we can, if something happens before then, or if we can figure out some other shows to do, we'll have one hopefully next week if we can. But yeah, I would say can't get too ahead of ourselves yet. I would expect the next show for sure to be after the draft lottery, breaking down where the Ducks are going to end up picking, and if it's not Bedard or if it's not 1 or 2 and Bedard or Fantilli, looking at who they could get at 3, or just looking at kind of the first round as a preview of who other teams could get. So anyway, thanks for listening, guys. Appreciate you guys sticking with us. Anybody who's missed the show, I know I've had a few of you reach out to me. I appreciate the support. Glad to be back. Glad to be back with you, Steven, on the show, doing it again. I missed it a lot, so it's nice to be back. Nice to be back recording shows for you guys, and hopefully we'll be back a lot more this offseason, just doing some fun stuff, some fun stuff that isn't talking about how bad the Ducks were this year.
No, exactly. So, good times ahead, man. I'm glad you're back.
All right, guys. Appreciate it. Take care.
Bye, everybody.